Okay, gentlemen, question. What do Robin Hood, Peter Pan, Jack in the Green, and Jesus all have in common? The answer is they all have mythic roots that go back to a masculine archetype called the Green Man. And in following on from my talk of the white feathered warriors for the Nimbin men's group, I'm going to fill out some of the details of this and see if it can help us tie together the themes of service and sacrifice that emerged in that talk and some of the themes around fertility and virility that we've addressed in previous talks. So what is the Green Man? The Green Man is an image that you see all through Europe in so many different cultures across millennia, right? Of a face that's made out of twining leaves and vine, right? You probably recognize it. It's around all over the place still to this day. As it happens, it's also the logo for my teaching academy, the Green Tongue Academy. So it's this image, and it's something that scholars have been very interested in because, for a start, it's all over the Christian cathedrals, all over Europe. There's this picture of the Green Man, of this, and otherwise Christian iconography. There's this glaring pagan image, right? Like the gargoyles, that's there on the cathedrals, like in the cathedrals. There's countless examples of them throughout Europe. And so it's first off, there's this question of like, what's it doing there? And how did the Green Man end up on Christian cathedrals? Well, before we answer that, I want to make note that he's ancient beyond reckoning, like all archetypes, right? And like all gods. His origins are lost inside the timelessness of the dream time. But there are clear classical precursors to it. The Romans have Sylvanus Salutaris, I think that's right. Sylvanus Salutaris, that's it, Sylvanus Salutaris. And it's a foliate head, it's got that same image. And his name, rather than being the Green Man, means the saviour of the fields, right? And so it's a symbol of male virility. And it's also a symbol of the springtime and that virility, that vital, boisterous, green force that just comes up and brings the world back to life again in spring. Now, in White Feathered Warriors, which if you haven't watched, I suggest that you pause and go back and watch before you listen to this. I gave this important precursor to this piece, which is that in Europe, we didn't have rain dances. Our shamans and mages and witches and wise women, they didn't do rain dances. Why? Well, there was no shortage of rain, right? So all of the rites and lore and myths and magic around rain dancing, which happens in Africa and in the New World, didn't take place in Europe. And so it's a completely different set. And instead of that, like why? Because we had so much rain. I mean, think about, like my ancestors come from Ireland and Wales. It's like if you're going to do a rain dance, it would be to stop the rain from falling, not to bring it to fall. So what did they do instead? What was their equivalent of the rain dance and the rain dances, right? As I pointed out in that previous lecture, we had green dances to dance the green back into the earth, to dance the winter away, not the drought, right? But the winter. And so when the world is covered in a white shroud of seeming death in winter, right? When the days are short and the nights are long and everyone is cold, when the fire pile is getting small, when the reserves of potatoes and roots and dried meat and smoked salmon are getting very, very thin, and there's very little to forage outside in the world, right? And when it feels like Fenrir, the great wolf, has swallowed the sun whole, and that the tribe can't survive. We can't go too much longer like this. We're going to starve. We're going to freeze. Then at the winter solstice, right? And in the depths of that, then our shamans and mages and witches and wise women, they were involved in not the calling of rain, but the calling of spring, right? The calling of the spring. That's why I call them green dancers, right? And simply put, the green man symbolizes this return of life, right? The rebirth of life that happens every spring, yeah. And so this is the simplest way for us to understand the green man. And these are the celebrations that happen at May Day, the dancing around the maypole and all of these things like this, right? And they are they're tied to a whole bunch of the dying gods, the gods that died so that life could continue, whether that be Osiris, whether it be Dionysus, whether it be Adonis, whether it be Jesus, right? Dying gods, male fertility, male virility gods, gave their virility, their life force, their verdant green souls. They sacrificed themselves so that life could continue. And the easiest one that most people are familiar with is Jesus. You know, that Jesus died so that human beings could have everlasting life. That's the Christian myth, right? But the reason why the green man is there on those Christian cathedrals is at the time when they're celebrating Easter and the rebirth of Jesus, that the pagan culture of Europe was already celebrating something similar. They were already celebrating the rebirth of spring, and they were already doing that with this image of the green man. Different images of dying gods and heroes that sacrificed themselves, that died and rose again in the springtime, right? That rose again in the green, right? And so there's so much lore around this. And if you're interested in diving deeper into this, then I'm really standing upon the shoulders of James Fraser, who wrote The Golden Bough, right? And the Golden Bough was mistletoe. And so he wrote a text at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, which is what Joseph Campbell drew upon in so many ways to be able to do his incredible work. He's an incredible mythologist at that particular time. And he's looking at the dying gods, right? Not goddesses, gods. And the way in which there's these patterns that run through so many of them across so many different cultures. And so those celebrations took place. They started in the winter, right? And then they were then celebrated in the springtime, right? And it's all about the rebirth, right? The rebirth. So as I've said elsewhere, whilst women are the guardians of the portal of life through birth, right? That's what women have because it's in their bodies. They are the womb bearers. And that leaves the masculine as guarding the portal of death, which sounds morbid, right? It's central to masculine mysteries. But death as a precursor to rebirth. So women hold birth and men hold rebirth. But there is no rebirth without death, right? So in the same way that I outlined that manhood is not given, you're not a man by virtue of just having a pair of testicles, according to anthropologists and looking at lots of different cultures. But that state of manhood, right, that state of being a white feathered warrior is dependent upon sacrifice, is dependent upon service, and that service requires sacrifice, right? So we've got these stories that are speaking about male virility, around the fecundity, the power, that fertilizing capacity of the masculine. And so it's not just the fertilizing capacity to put a baby in a woman's womb, but it's much larger. It's the capacity to fertilize culture, to fertilize community, to fertilize the earth itself and to fertilize heaven, to fertilize consciousness, to fertilize psyche, that the virility of the masculine is necessary for all of those things to be able to die and then be reborn, right? And the green man is a picture of this. A very, and he has all these different versions. In the United Kingdom, then Jack o' Lent, right? Because Lent is happening, the Christian festival of Lent throughout this time. Jack of Lent, or Jack in the Green. These are versions of the green man, right? And they then gave rise to later myths which morphed and changed and turned into characters like Robin Hood, who's an iteration of this, and also Peter Pan, right? So they change and they morph, and you know the image gets a little bit diluted, but that's the origins of them, right? And so if you can think of like Guy Fawkes Day celebrations and things like this, where that man is burnt, right? That effigy of the man is burnt. That was happening long before anything to do with Guy Fawkes trying to set fire to the Parliament. That was a symbol of sacrifice. Like Jesus on the cross, Guy Fawkes was originally like a green man character, a sacrificial male who sacrifices his life force, either literally in dying for his people, his community, his earth and his gods, or mythopoetically in sacrificing psychologically and socially and soulfully, right? But not actually physically dying, right? So there's different versions of that. And so all of these characters are all pointing to some of these central themes in mythology. And I want to tell you one of the most interesting and a little gory classical versions of this. I'm going to do it fairly quickly so that we can get to the heart of why I think this is important for us to be able to understand as men. And so it's a classical Greek myth about Attis. And Attis is an Adonis-like character. It's the story of Attis and Sybil. And so it goes something like this, is that Sky Father and Earth Mother, right? Zeus and Hera, or Demeter, depending on the story, how it's told, come together and they fuck like only gods can fuck, right? Thunderously, riotously, right? Dangerously, passionately. And out of their union comes a being of incredible power. And that being contains both Sky Father and Earth Mother. And that means that this being is a hermaphrodite. It has masculine and feminine qualities together. And that being, that daemon, that incredible force, its name was Agdistis. Agdistis. And so the rest of the Olympian gods, seeing Agdistis and seeing that it contains, is not just masculine and not just feminine, but both of those powers combined, they get jealous and they get scared. They say, what are we going to do with this incredible force? It's too strong, it's too powerful. What will we do? And so they get together, they have figured it out, and Dionysus, another dying god, right, who dies and is reborn like Jesus, and is the god of wine and ecstasy and orgies. He gets Agdistis drunk, and then when Agdistis is incredibly drunk, then this is the gory part, one of them, he ties a leather thong around Agdistis's ankle, pulls it up close, and then ties the other end of this strap around Agdistis's male members, right, around his cock and balls, and it's tied there around about this. And then when Agdistis wakes up, stretches out its legs, and with its godlike hermaphroditic power, there's incredible force inside that, and castrates itself, right, accidentally. And this was Dionysus's design, and the gods wanted to. It's just like, we can't have a god that is holding all of that power. One god cannot hold all of that power. So Agdistis gets castrated, and when the Agdistis's balls, I can't say he or she, when Agdistis's balls land upon Earth, then out of that incredible power forms an almond tree. Now, there's a lot of castration in classical myths. You remember that, it's like central to the story of how Zeus came to be king of the gods. and the castration of Uranus by Kronos, right? And the way in which when those balls were then thrown into the ocean, when God's balls are thrown anywhere, then a goddess or a god is formed. So Aphrodite herself forms out of the frothing, foaming, churning oceans when Uranus's balls are cast into the ocean, right? So that's how the goddess of love was forged, because balls are powerful. They contain thunder and lightning. They contain the force of springtime. They are generative. They are powerful, just like wombs are powerful, right? And so if it's the balls of a god, then what is going to happen? So anyway, the balls of Aegisthus land on the earth and an almond tree grows, and a nymph is walking past, Nana, and she starts gathering almonds, and she's putting them in a basket, and one of them falls into her cleavage. And as soon as it does, it's so potent, being forged of God's balls, that she becomes pregnant. That's the power, that's the virility that we're talking about here. She becomes pregnant. And so she becomes pregnant, and she eventually gives birth to Attis, this beautiful, beautiful boy, right? But her father doesn't want him around, and so they expose him, and he's raised by a he-goat out in the wild. Thought that would expose him like the Greeks used to and other cultures used to, and that he would die, but he doesn't. He's just raised by a he-goat, a goat, right? Like Pan, like a horny goat, a wild, virile, strong, goat. That's why the goats are associated with the devil, right? So anyway, he's raised by a goat. And then eventually he grows up to be this sexy, beautiful man, right? Attis is like Adonis, like incredibly beautiful, because he's got God's balls inside him via the semen of the almond, right? And so almond is like God's semen. And almonds are used that way in Ayurvedic medicine and a range of things as tonics for semen, right? As fertility enhancing. That's central in tantric practices and things like this as well. So he's got the milk of almonds in his vein, and he is fair to behold and beautiful and virile and strong, and to look at him is to desire him. And so he ends up getting betrothed for a whole bunch of reasons to King Midas's daughter. Midas, with the Midas touch, everything turns into gold. And so they're going to have a wedding ceremony. And when he's there, then Aegisthus, who has since been castrated and is now a goddess, the goddess Sibyl, right? And she is known as Mater Theon, the mother of the gods, or she's known as Magna Mater, the great mother, right? She's got a huge cult that stretches way beyond the Greeks. Magna, the great mother. She is this great mother, and seeing Attis, she falls in love with Attis. Perhaps falling in love with, like, recognizing her own balls and dick that have, been incarnated in Attis through that process of impregnation, right? And it's a divine impregnation, a bit like Mary, right, in the Jesus stories, right? And so he's this like Jesus-like character. And so he's there, and he's going to get married, and he's there with King Midas and all of the people. And then because Sibyl desires, the great mother desires Attis so strongly, she appears there, like lusting and crushing and infatuated by this god-man, Attis. But because she is the great mother, because she dwarfs all other goddesses and would have dwarfed all of the gods and all of the goddesses if they had not castrated the divine hermaphrodite, then simply to behold her in her glory sends all the people at the wedding mad. They just go into a frenzy, an orgiastic, ecstatic, violent frenzy, a Dionysian kind of rite. And it's just like, ah! Their mortal minds cannot encompass the vastness of this goddess, right? And in that frenzy, Attis is affected, and so is King Midas. And what these two do is, in their madness, they cut off their own balls, right? So we have a continuity of this theme of castration, right? I told you it's all through myths all over the world, castration stuff, right? The sacrifice of that which is most fertile so that life can continue. Green life in almond trees and mistletoe and things like this. And so in a state of ecstatic frenzy and madness, they cut off their own balls. And so then, because of the hemorrhaging, Attis lies there underneath a pine tree. A pine tree. The only tree that stays green when everything else goes barren in the wintertime. Itself a symbol of virility. Itself a symbol of the green man energy. Attis lies underneath the Christmas tree, a pine tree, bleeding to death. And Sybil is there weeping for her lost son, her lost love, her lost balls, right? And she prays to Zeus. And Zeus then, at the moment of death, allows deathlessness. Like it's a Jesus' death and rebirth. And Attis is reborn in the tree, in the pine tree, in the evergreen pine tree, as a symbol of life that is renewed, right? And so then seeing him die like that and being reborn, then a whole bunch of the priests that are there that convert and become instantly priests of Sybil, then they, in their grief at seeing the goddess's son lost and died and reincarnated in the tree, then they ritually castrate themselves all underneath the tree, and their blood flows in and the earth is greened in this way, right? So that's the core story, and it's kind of gory, right? And you're like, what the hell is this about? Why is this in our mythology, and what was it for? Well, it's there for a whole bunch of things, but it shows us, one, it was a classical cult that went through to the Romans, was there in the time of the Greeks, preceded the Greeks, that people all over the world have had at times ritual castration, right? Men sacrificing that which is most precious to them, their own balls, right? That which is full of life, so that life may continue, right? It's a ritual sacrifice, right, that was done. And so it was actually literally done, but it was also non-literally or ritually done. Literally done and ritually done. And then in the festivities that came after this, then a pine tree would often be carried, and it would be carried, up by the shamans on winter solstice in a range of traditions. The Christmas tree, the pine tree, is the one thing that was alive in the dead of winter when everything else was dead, except the mistletoe. So mistletoe, that's the Nordic stories. It's the pine tree of the Norse, the mistletoe. But it's something that's green when everything else is barren, right? And they would take it up onto the highest mountain, our mages and witches and shamans, right? And they would set fire to it to bring back the light and the life on winter solstice. And that's where our Christmas tree comes from. A green bough that's got lights all over it. Once it was on fire, then it had candles, now it has electricity. But it's a symbol of life, the light of life, the green light of life, right, in the Christmas tree. And then we also have all of these May Day festivities in pagan culture, where the men would dress up, sometimes as the spirit of the green or the spirit of the trees, and they would either carry a tree down or they would dress all in green, and they would dance and they would be frenzied and they would do all these things. I don't think they were cutting their testicles off at this particular point. But the point of it is that at winter and then in spring, there's a celebration, a calling, a green dancing to call forth green life once again. And because there can be no creation without sacrifice, that for anything to be born, something must die. For a fire to be born, the wood must die. For ice to be born, the water must die. For a pot to be born, then the clay must die. For a child to be born, then the maiden must die. For the mother to give birth to herself, she must first die to her previous self, right? And so this is the center of a whole bunch of male mysteries. And it acknowledges that within men is one half of the divine hermaphrodite, of the cosmic power. And so yes, women are holders of a deep, deep mystery, the mystery of birth, right? And that has its own tragedies and its own beauties, right? And it is sacred. What we've forgotten in the modern era is that so many of our fertility rites in the past were led by men, right? We have the Persephone stories, we know the female ones, but so many of them were led by men and they required male sacrifice. They required the actual death of the king. The king would be slain, physically, literally slain in a whole bunch of cultures, right? So that society could be renewed. Just imagine your favorite king in the modern era. Think of a president or despot and the way in which that culture could maybe be renewed if they were like ritually slain, right? It's like something dies and something starts again. It's the end of an era, something starts again. So there was all of this male sacrifice that then became increasingly ritualized that didn't involve actual death, right? That was a ritual death. And this is why these symbols of the green man were preserved on our Christian cathedrals. Is because the green man is the precursor to Jesus. He is Jesus arisen. He is the springtime Jesus, right? He's also, though, the sacrificial Christmas tree. The Christmas tree, the ever-living Christmas tree, right? This ever upright phallus of the forest that is killed and sacrificed and set on fire so that the world may live again. So Jesus was following in a millennia-old tradition around male sacrifice, ritual and literal, right? That is central to the virilization of the world. So we can say here that women are in charge of fertility and men are the bearers of virility. And to be virile just means to be manlike, right? To be manly. It's male fertility is virility. And we need to reclaim this word, right? Virility. And virility is so much more than sperm count, right? So much more than morphology or any of these things. Virility is not just, male virility is not just about putting babies in wombs. As these myths show us, it's about life at its core, right? As is female fertility, right? But male virility is not, and anthropologists confirm that masculinity is not really defined by the feminine, not really defined by sexuality or sexual conquest across lots and lots of cultures. It's defined socially. What makes a man is not how many women he's slept with, right? Or how many babies he's managed to get in women, right? That's a modern idea, Darwinian idea perhaps, right? What makes a man, according to so many cultures, is social, not sexual. It means his service, like the alpha chimps, the service to the tribe. The one that sacrifices the most is the alpha. The one that is in service of all. The one at the bottom of the pyramid becomes the top of the pyramid. The servant to all becomes the leader, right? The greatest sacrifice is that of the alpha chimp, right? As Frans de Waal's research showed us so beautifully. So we have this, and this flows through into little versions of it, of the virile imagination of Peter Pan that's ever youthful, right? And evergreen like that pine tree. Or the robbing the rich to support the poor in Robin Hood. These are medieval adaptations, Christianizations and changes that come from this kind of story that I'm telling you here. And so how do we bring this together in terms of our world today? One, as I spoke about in the fertile phallus, is that male virility is not just about your capacity to conceive a baby. It is a psychic state of mind. To be virile of body, you should also strive to be virile of mind, right? And we know that trauma and stress and depression and mental health all drive down fertility, sperm count and testosterone and all these other things, right? So we know that there's a pragmatic side to that, but it's not about pragmatics. It's about being able to be a green force of life in the cosmos, right? In the largest arena that you can dream forth. Yes, for your friends. Yes, for your family. Yes, for your community. Yes, for your nation. Yes, for your species. Yes, for the earth. Yes, for the stars. Yes, for psyche. Yes, for spirit. That green living force is there inside you, brother. You are not the bearer of original sin. You are not what is wrong with the world today. You contain the seeds, right? The seeds of a brighter tomorrow. These myths teach us this, right? That living force, that virile green fuse must be lit. And that involves sacrifice. It doesn't literally require you to cut off your manhood. This is not what I'm suggesting. It doesn't literally require you to sacrifice your life. Let me be very, very clear, brothers. I'm not talking about a literal death here. I'm talking about soulful, personal, psychological, and spiritual sacrifice in service of the largest thing that you can encompass and entail and devote yourself to. And this is the fertile phallus. This is what virility is. It is not just a hard cock. It is what that hard cock symbolizes, right? It is an erect spirit reaching for the stars, right? And there in these stories, in these green dances, in these tree spirits, in these green men at the dancing around the maypole, right? There, that is a symbol, a glorious myth around the fecundity, the power, the procreative potential inside the male psyche and the male spirit. And I bless you with that virility, my brother. May you be a force of regreening the human imagination, the human soul, and the cosmos at large.